Question. Dear Kim, is a person not being able to do simple things? Does that mean that that person has a low level of consciousness or something else is going on? What are the spiritual causes for a person who can't do simple things? And am I missing anything else? I feel like I'm struggling with life in general because I don't know how to do this or that. I feel like I'm suffering maybe every day. I have tried to look into my psychology on what I need to overcome, what I need to let go of or give up. I'm trying to overcome the separate selves that I have or have created in the past or in this lifetime, or even carried with me over many past lifetimes. I'm trying to do what I need to do to overcome my sense of struggle with life or suffering and attachments that I currently have. So my question is, how can I use the spiritual teachings given by the Ascended Masters through you to make maximum spiritual progress to flow with the river of life, regardless of the outer conditions that I currently have? Well, yeah, I understand that you can have people who have studied the teachings, who have applied the tools, but who feel like they haven't broken through. I understand this. I have, of course, over the many years I've been on the path, I met people who, whatever spiritual teaching it was, they find a teaching, they study it, they practice whatever practice there is, and it seems like they're doing everything right on the outer, but they're not really having the results. They're not really breaking through. And I have addressed this in a couple of other questions, but let me take another stab at it here. Basically, I would say that there's something you haven't seen. And I know this is not very comforting, because obviously if you had seen it, you would have changed it. But nevertheless, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing going on. It's not bad karma or bad luck or whatever. There's something in your psychology that you haven't seen. And it's related to some subconscious selves that you simply haven't gone deep enough to expose them. But it can also be a general attitude to life. And I would say that on something like this, you know, a person not being able to do simple things relating to everyday life, it's not uncommon to see in spiritual people. You have, if you look back at the age of Pisces, you see that many spiritual people would withdraw from society, live in some kind of monastic setting. And if you go back and look at these people, their psychology, many of them were exactly like this. They couldn't do simple things. They couldn't make their everyday lives work. They couldn't take responsibility for having a job, making a living, having children, this or that. They just simply couldn't deal with the practical, physical, material aspects of life. And I have met many people on the spiritual path who were in that same state of mind. And I, for example, have seen people who found a spiritual movement, they offered them a way they could work for the movement, and they took it so that they could live in this protected environment where they were told what to do, they didn't have to make their own decisions. And so, so there are two things that can be going on here in the psychology. First of all, you can have been a monk or a nun in many past lifetimes, living in these spiritual settings, where basically you make a decision to go into a monastery. And that's the last decision you personally need to make, because you'll be told what to do, there'll be a routine you'll follow, and you can't really do anything wrong if you do all the outer things that are required. And if you have done this for several lifetimes, and now you are in a situation where you can't go into a monastery, or at least you haven't decided to do so, yeah, that can be the problem. You simply can't deal with everyday life, because you're so used to this spiritual lifestyle, you might say. So this can be one thing. Another thing that can be going on, and it can of course be related, but another thing that can be going on is that you are afraid to make your own decisions. And this can go back to what I talk about in my playlist about avatar psychology, where I say there are avatars who came to Earth voluntarily to help improve things on Earth. And we were exposed to this very great trauma by the fallen beings that gave us this birth trauma. And we created what's called the primal self that colors how we look at life on Earth. And in many cases, this birth trauma was because we were fooled by the fallen beings into making some kind of decision that had very big, drastic consequences. And now, as a result of that, having not resolved this birth trauma, we distrust our ability to make decisions. We are afraid that it will lead to disastrous consequences, and therefore we would rather not make a decision. And this can prevent us from functioning in everyday life. And of course, if you have this unwillingness to make decisions, it seems much easier to go into a monastery where you just make the decision to go in, and then you don't need to make any other decisions. And maybe you can even make yourself believe that you are guaranteed to be saved after this lifetime because you're serving God as a monk or nun. So, watch my Avatar Psychology playlist, apply some of the tools to resolve these deep traumas, and see where that gets you. Because, as I've said several times, we are in the Aquarian age, and the old model of being spiritual means you withdraw from the world. That's not the most constructive approach in the Aquarian age. It is that we actually live an active life in society where we can make our lives function. And quite frankly, it's not beyond the capabilities of anybody if they, number one, resolve with psychology, and number two, study, learn things so you can make your daily life work, get a job, pay the bills, and function. Then you can have enough time left over to do spiritual pursuits after that. But I've seen spiritual people over the years who were so focused on doing spiritual work that it was just an excuse because they didn't want to deal with practical life. So they dug themselves into a hole, or they got themselves into all kinds of difficult situations because they were always trying to avoid working and taking a job and making a living because it was so much more important to meditate or whatever. And you just need to come to a point where you say, okay, I'm not going to go into a monastery, so I have to make a living. So I have to find a way to make a living that gives me enough money and hopefully something I don't hate doing, so that I can then have enough free time and money left over to focus on my spiritual pursuits. You just simply have to be practical and say, it's actually better for my long-term spiritual growth that I get my practical life to function so I have time and energy and money left over for my spiritual pursuits. That will give me, in the long run, higher spiritual growth than always going back and forth and always trying to avoid doing the practical things and ignoring the practical aspects of life. Quite frankly, if you have spiritual maturity, if you have raised your consciousness to a certain level, it will not be difficult to make the practical aspects of life work. It will not be difficult. It's just something you get out of the way so you can do what you're here to do in your divine plan. So I'm not saying that a person who can't make simple things work has a low level of consciousness, but the person doesn't have a high level of consciousness in my view. And I know there are people who will say, oh, but look at this spiritual master, he didn't deal with any practical things because the people in his ashram were doing all the practical things for him. But I just think, you should be able to do some practical things in life and make everyday life work for you. It's just simply part of spiritual growth. I mean, to me, the higher your level of consciousness, the easier it is to do all these practical things. The less attention you need to spend on getting your practical life to work. So what I'm saying is that, well, let me do this. The pie chart. So here you have a pie. This is your attention. And so here you have a certain amount of things you have to do, like eat or sleep or whatever. So they take up a certain amount of your life. And then you have to do the practical things like make a living. And the question is, how much does that take up? So let's say that this these are the practical things, right? And these are the practical aspects of life. They take up that much. And these are the spiritual. That's not a good balance, obviously. But the higher you raise your consciousness, the easier it becomes to do the practical things. So you can move this so it takes up less and less of your time to do the practical things, and you have more left over for the spiritual things. To me, that's a sign of spiritual maturity and spiritual growth. If it's the opposite way around, I just don't think that's really spiritual growth. And again, I know I've met many spiritual people on the path over the years who would dispute this. They would say, again, this master and this and that. But I just don't agree with that. I think that the higher your consciousness is, the easier it is to prioritize and say, but listen, there are some practical aspects of life that just have to work. So if I have to focus my attention on this for a certain amount of time, fine. Then I do it, I focus all my attention on it, I don't resist it, just get it done, and then I can focus on other activities. And it's like, for me, I look back, when I was younger. Work was something I resisted. Psychologically, I resisted doing it because it took time away from my spiritual pursuits. But gradually over time it shifted, and now I don't resist it. If I decide this is what I got to do, then I do it. It takes a certain amount of work to write a book, for example, and publish a book, or even record a video and put it on YouTube. So you could say, is it spiritual to sit there and proofread and edit or whatever? But it is as spiritual as you make it. And I don't resist it anymore, doing work. I don't resist doing garden work and mowing the lawn and this and that, because there are certain things that have to be done so life just functions. And I just think the more spiritual you are, the less resistance you have towards anything. And all of a sudden, you are spiritualizing your activities. And you will see some of these Buddhist monks that are talking about how doing these ordinary things, like drawing water out of the well, or cooking, or cleaning, or this and that, this is part of their spiritual practice. It's not something they resist doing. And I just think that the less resistance, the higher your level of consciousness.